In today's season premiere, host Dr. Mark Plotkin of the Amazon Conservation Team delves into the captivating ethnobotany of cacao, from its early use by indigenous peoples of South America to its pivotal role in the cultures of the Maya and Aztecs. Cacao's journey spans centuries and continents, leaving a profound botanical, cultural, and economic legacy. Join Dr. Plotkin as he unravels the fascinating history of this remarkable plant in an exploration of chocolate's past and present.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 6 of the Plants of the Gods podcast, now with over 1 million episodes downloaded. I'm your host, Mark Plotkin, Dr. Mark Plotkin of the Amazon Conservation Team on the web at www.amazonteam.org. One of the major themes of Plants of the Gods has been how these plants and fungi, and even hallucinogenic animals, can benefit us in unforeseen ways, often in ways very different from that used by the indigenous peoples who we continuously celebrate in the course of this podcast. Let me give you a surprising and wonderful example. I want to talk today about cacao, chocolate, truly a plant of the gods, as reflected in the Latin name for the plant, Theobroma, which literally means food of the gods. But let me first detail how this rainforest tree played a stunning but little-known role in a historic development in industrial design. At the beginning of the previous century, Coca-Cola was sold in a plain glass bottle like those then used by most soft drink manufacturers. It had been invented in Atlanta by pharmacist John Pemberton in 1886, but as its popularity rapidly spread across the country, competitors began producing similar drinks with similar names, counting on boosting sales by confusing customers. In 1915, the Coca-Cola Company decided to hold a contest to create a bottle so distinctive that any person could tell it was a real Coca-Cola, even when they were reaching into a dark icebox. The Root Glass Company of Terre Haute, Indiana, responded to the challenge. Several employees visited their local library to learn more about Coke's ingredients, which included both the coca leaf and the cola nut, thinking that these tropical fruits might inspire some design ideas. While flipping through some encyclopedia entries, there was no internet available then in 1886, imagine that, they stumbled across a drawing of a cacao pod. Although cacao was never an ingredient in Coca-Cola, the designers were inspired by the indented striations along the length of the cacao pod and its elongated shape and swollen middle, resulting in their Coke bottle being given a central bulge and longitudinal grooves deep in the tapered end of the bottle, identical to the Amazonian fruit. Based on the design they submitted, Root Glass won the contest. The result was an enduring, distinctive, and iconic design that enhanced brand identity, provided a comfortable grip, and has played a key role in making the Coke bottle one of the most recognized symbols around the world, celebrated in art by everyone from Salvador Dali to Andy Warhol. But take a minute to relish the irony. Perhaps the most iconic and enduring symbol of American capitalism is a bottle which contains a drink, Coca-Cola, made from a combination of flavors derived from a combination of a tropical South American plant, that is Coca, and a tropical African plant, cola, and the bottle is based on an Amazonian fruit, cacao, but is regarded as a symbol of America. But let's turn to cacao and chocolate itself. As this podcast is called Plants of the Gods, few species could be more relevant than this one. As I mentioned at the outset, chocolate was deemed the food of the gods in 1753 when Carl Linnaeus, the father of scientific classification, christened the genus as Theobroma, from the Greek word theo, meaning God, and broma, meaning food. To be clear, we're living in a world drenched in chocolate. With its rich history and diverse uses, chocolate permeates many aspects of society, serving as a symbol of indulgence, comfort, luxury, and even decadence. It continues to have a profound impact on economies, consumption patterns, health, and even culinary experimentation around the world. With the global annual market value far in excess of $100 billion, that's $100 billion a year, chocolate and cacao may be worth as much as, or even more than, corn, wheat, and soybeans, at least according to some estimates. Americans seldom miss an opportunity to give, or better, receive, chocolate as gifts. Virtually no other confection is so much a part of Easter, Valentine's Day, and Halloween, not to mention chocolate exchanged at birthdays, Christmas, and both Mother's and Father's Day. Nor is chocolate only for dessert these days. We still devour chocolate bars, hot chocolate, chocolate cake, chocolate chip cookies, chocolate shakes, chocolate fondue, and chocolate ice cream. But adventurous foodies have pushed the boundary still further with chocolate-covered ants, chocolate-covered crickets, and chocolate-covered grasshoppers, chocolate-covered bacon, chocolate pasta, and chocolate salami appearing on some menus. And chocolate is proving its versatility as both a sweet and a savory ingredient. Cacao nib barbecue rubs are increasingly popular. And the ultimate savory use of cacao for savory purposes is as the key ingredient in Mexican mole sauce, truly a food of the gods. If you've never tried mole, turn off this podcast, go to the best Mexican restaurant you find, and order mole. You are in for a treat. But before we dive into a river of chocolate, like the kid in Roald Dahl's classic Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, let's do a bit of clarification. Cacao refers to the chocolate tree and its various products. Cocoa refers to processed products from the cocoa beans, like cocoa powder and cocoa butter. Coca, however, refers to the erythroxylum plant, the source of coca leaves and cocaine that we covered in Season 1. Coconut refers to the coconut palm that we will cover in a future episode. I just wanted to make sure that none of our loyal listeners get confused and eat a Mounds bar of chocolate-covered coconut and think they are ingesting high-quality cocaine. Or put in a historical context, quote, what the Incas chewed, Coca, was not what the Aztecs brewed, Cacao. Once again, as I like to say, what the Incas chewed was not what the Aztecs brewed. And let's continue with a pair of great quotes. The first is from Sarah Moss and Alexander Badenoch from their book Chocolate, A Global History. Quote, chocolate is complicated. The chocolate tree grows only within 20 degrees of the equator, only below 1,000 feet in altitude. It requires shade, which must be provided by adjacent taller trees, as well as humidity, and a temperature that does not fall below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, all of which means that chocolate does not grow within thousands of miles of the countries that consume the most chocolate. In the Book of Chocolate by H.P. Newquist, a particular favorite of mine, the author notes, quote, the great paradox of chocolate production is that it is a complicated blend of simple ingredients, cocoa butter, cocoa powder, sugar, and milk. That's it. The ingredients are about as basic as cooking gets, and the production, as we will see, is about as complicated as any in the entire food world. End of quote. But let's talk a bit about the botany of the cacao tree. Because cacao was first encountered by Westerners in Central America and the Caribbean, there is a widespread belief that the cacao tree was native to the region. This is like coffee that was first found in the Middle East, even though we know from the earlier episode it was native to Ethiopia. We now know that cacao is an understory tree native to the species-diverse rainforests of the northwest Amazon. The tree produces football-shaped pods that are about a foot in length, with longitudinal striations, like the bottom half of a Coke bottle, and contains anywhere from 20 to 60 seeds. The color of the pods can be quite striking, red, orange, gold, or even deep purple. So bizarre and colorful are these pods that a stroll through a cacao forest can feel like one is on the set of a Hollywood movie. You know, something like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Add to the surreal appearance of this rainforest landscape is that these huge pods grow directly out of the tree trunk rather than at the tips of the branches. This type of unusual flower and fruit production is known as cauliflory, cauliflory, cauliflory. In this case, cauliflory is believed to increase pollination efficiency in that cacao is pollinated by tiny flies, 1/25 of an inch long, known as midges, which beat their wings over 1,000 times per second, that live near the forest floor. Furthermore, because the pods are so large, cauliflory produces fruits easily accessible to larger terrestrial mammals like tapirs, quadrimundis, and agoutis, which facilitates seed dispersal, although arboreal primates like both the woolly monkey and the squirrel monkeys are said to descend from the forest canopy to devour the delicious fruits. Once the flowers have been pollinated by these midges, the pods can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to ripen. In plantations, the pods are picked by hand and carefully split open with machetes, and both the seeds, known as cocoa beans, and the surrounding pulp are scraped out. These seeds and pulp are left to ferment for a week, during which time enzymes and yeast convert the existing chemicals into more chocolatey compounds. As part of the process, the pulp is liquefied and is sometimes drained off to be drunk as is or allowed to ferment to produce a slightly alcoholic beverage, which, as we will see, becomes an important part of the chocolate story. The fermentation of these seeds and their eventual roasting, much like with coffee, yield the desired flavors which simply do not exist in the raw fruit. And we talk about cacao beans like we talk about coffee beans, but neither are true beans because they are not related to the legume family. Now let's delve into the intriguing history and prehistory of chocolate. One of the many challenges in deciphering the prehistory and ethnobotany of the extraordinary plant is the lack of a written language in pre-contact Amazonia. The great Charles Clement, the leading expert of the domestication of Amazonian plant crops, told me that he believes that indigenous peoples in South America started appreciating the tasty aril, that is the succulent seed coat, of cacao somewhere between 24 and 5,000 years ago. Plant compounds that are juicy and sweet, and the juice they produce can be fermented into a mildly alcoholic drink. And as most of my fellow ethnobotanists can readily attest, fermented cacao beer is infinitely more tasty than the dreaded fermented cassava beer. So this brings us to the great unanswered question in the prehistory of cacao. How and why did indigenous peoples in Central America, home to rich rainforests brimming with tasty fruits like the ice cream bean or the hog plum, go to the trouble of bringing cacao fruit all the way from the western Amazon to Mesoamerica? And why was chocolate invented in Central America and not in Amazonia, where cacao was native? Remember that chocolate is made from the roasted cacao seed, which the indigenous peoples of Amazonia never figured out how to do. That was invented or learned or discovered in Central America or Mesoamerica. Another quick definition, Mesoamerica is a term used by anthropologists to describe the tropical region that extends from Central America south to much of Central America. The Brazilian ethnobotanist Mateo Colli Silva had an interesting hypothesis as to why this took place. Quote, "The movement of cacao from the Amazon to Mesoamerica likely happened due to a combination of several factors. Indigenous trade networks facilitated the exchange of goods, potentially including cacao. Furthermore, societies have a history of experimenting with new plants and foods, and cacao's unique qualities may have made it appealing for cultivation. While Central America boasted diverse fruits, cacao offered distinct flavor and potential medicinal benefits, incentivizing its transportation. Over time, knowledge of cacao processing could have spread, leading to the development of chocolate-making techniques. The movement of cacao may have been part of this broader exchange system, where different religions specialized in the production of specific commodities. Another or additional explanations for the appeal of cacao is the presence of two stimulant chemicals in the fruit, theobromine and caffeine. While cacao has a much lower percentage of stimulating alkaloids than coffee, in a pre-Columbian population that lacked other stimulants like coffee, the effect of a little caffeine may have been profound. Remember, as we discussed in the coffee episode, a stimulant is a substance which tends to increase activity in the central nervous system, leading to increased alertness and energy, and enhanced focus and performance, and decreased drowsiness. In moderation, a stimulant can produce a sense of comfort and well-being, even a subtle sense of euphoria. In attempting to decipher how theobroma moved up from the western Amazon to Central America, my mentor Richard Schultes, in a classic 1984 paper, posited three possible routes. Number 1, over the Andes and up the Pacific coast. Number 2, up the Rio Negro in Brazil and then the Cassiquiare and the Orinoco in Venezuela to the Caribbean coast. And 3, down the Amazon and then west along the Atlantic and back up the Caribbean coast. It seems like the number 1 scenario is the most likely. Since the appearance of Schultes' paper in 1984, a missing piece of the puzzle has been located and excavated. The San Agustin La Florida culture, known as SALF, for the acronym San Agustin La Florida, in the upper Amazon, southeastern highlands of Ecuador. The SALF people, known as the Mayo Chinchipe culture, maintained trade relationships with other pre-Columbian groups on the Pacific coast, with whom they traded for conch shells and spondylus spiny oyster shells. Flourishing from 1500 BCE to 500 CE, the Mayo Chinchipe built sophisticated structures and produced beautiful pottery, and they had domesticated cacao 5,450 years ago. SALF represents the early evidence of cacao use in the Americas and reveals the upper Amazon as the oldest center of cacao domestication yet identified. After SALF, the next earliest sites are in Central America. Whereas most of the accounts detailing the prehistory of chocolate focus on the relatively well-known Olmecs, Mayas, and Aztecs, there's another group that has come to light relatively recently which played an important role, the Mokaya, M-O-K-A-Y-A. Rising about 650 BCE, the Mokaya flourished in southernmost Mexico and adjacent Guatemala. They created some of Mesoamerica's initial sedentary settlements and may have been the first Central Americans to consume cacao, possibly as far back as 1900 BCE. Given that there were Mokaya settlements like Paso de la Armada near the Pacific coast of what is now the Mexican state of Chiapas, it is not inconceivable that the Mayo Chinchipe in Ecuador shared cacao across the Andes with their Pacific coastal trading partners, who then in turn passed it on to the Mokayas to the north. So the Mokaya were processing and drinking liquid chocolate in 1900 BC, and the Olmecs were doing it several hundred years later. The Olmecs represent one of the earliest complex societies in Mesoamerica, occupying the tropical lowlands along the Gulf of Mexico and what are now the Mexican states of Tabasco and Veracruz. They flourished from about 1400 BCE to 400 BCE. The Olmecs were known to have played the Mesoamerican ball game and practiced ritual bloodletting, two customs that were carried forward by subsequent Central American groups like the Mayas and the Aztecs. They are best known to the outside world, however, for having carved giant stone heads, multi-ton basalt depictions of their rulers. The Olmecs also created a written language, which is yet to be deciphered, but cacao residues in their drinking vessels indicate that, in the words of archaeoethnobotanist Pat McGovern, who we hope to interview for an upcoming episode, said, quote, The Olmecs were avid consumers of a chocolate beverage on celebratory and ritual occasions. The Olmecs spread the heavenly drink far and wide. It was to become the elite beverage of the later Mayas and Aztecs." End of quote. Through their written records and fabulous architecture, the Mayans are much better known than the Mocayas and the Olmecs that preceded them. The Mayan kingdoms dominated the rainforests of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico from 2000 BCE until 1500 CE, and it established cacao plantations there by 600 BCE. They're renowned for their art, particularly the spectacular colored mural paintings and tombs, and their jade carvings as well, their astronomical prowess, and for building towering pyramids of limestone like those we can still see today at Chichen Itza, Palenque, and Tikal. Cacao held a paramount position in the cultural and religious fabric of Maya civilization. Beyond mere sustenance, it served as a cornerstone of their daily rituals and spiritual beliefs. The Maya ingeniously incorporated cacao into their cuisine, enjoying it as both a beverage and a staple in various dishes, like the Mexicans enjoy in mole today. Whether as a comforting gruel or a richly brewed elixir, cacao graced Mayan tables and ceremonies alike. The reverence for cacao transcended mere culinary delight. It was woven into the very essence of Maya society. From the humblest gatherings to the most elaborate feast, cacao was a constant presence, symbolizing abundance, vitality, and divine connection. Artifacts and artworks from Mayan civilization vividly depict scenes of cacao preparation, harvest, and consumption, illustrating its integral role in their daily lives and religious practices. Believing it to be imbued with sacred properties, the Maya offered cacao as a token of reverence during religious ceremonies, honoring both their gods and their ancestors. Thus, cacao became more than just a culinary ingredient, it became a conduit for spiritual communion, a symbol of the enduring bond between the Maya people and their beliefs. One manifestation of this was Ecchua, an important Mayan deity specifically associated with merchants and cacao producers in their mythology. He's often depicted carrying a backpack and a lance, necessary tools for a traveling merchant. Ecchua was venerated through elaborate rituals and offerings, particularly during trading expeditions and agricultural festivals, where offerings of cacao beans were made to the deities. Maya merchants would invoke his blessings for successful voyages and prosperous business transactions, while farmers sought his favor for bountiful harvests of cacao and other crops. Ecchua served as the embodiment of the enduring connection between cacao, trade, and the spiritual world in Mayan traditions. In the case of both the Maya and the Aztecs, sophisticated economies and trade networks made full use of cacao beans as currency, since they were of a uniform size, lightweight, and easy to transport, so much so that the use of cacao beans as essentially money continued for a period under Spanish rule as well. Both taxes and tribute to the Mayan and later Aztec royalty were levied in the form of cacao beans. So valuable was cacao as currency that archaeologists have found counterfeit beans, and cacao beans are often found in the tombs of Mayan nobles. Therefore, Mayan reverence for cacao beans disproves two common adages. One, money doesn't grow on trees, and two, you can't take it with you. Cacao money did grow on trees, and Mayan lords did take it with them in their tombs to the afterlife. We know the precise date of when Europeans first encountered the Mayans and first encountered cacao as well, August 15th, 1502. Christopher Columbus was on his fourth and final voyage of discovery, sailing off the northern coast of Guanaja, one of the Bay Islands of what is now Honduras. There he encountered an enormous Mayan trading canoe, laden with cotton garments, war clubs, and an unusual plant product which the Spaniards regarded as some sort of almond. Years later, Columbus' son Ferdinand, who was accompanying his father on the voyage, described the encounter. Quote, "For their provisions, they had roots and grains, as are eaten in Hispaniola," probably corn and cassava, "and a sort of wine made from corn," chicha, "which resembled English beer, and many of those almonds," that is, cacao beans, "which in Mexico are used for money." They seemed to greatly value these almonds, for when they were brought aboard ship together with their goods, I observed that, when any of these almonds fell, they stooped to pick it up as if an eye had fallen out of their heads. End of quote. So the two Columbuses, notoriously bad botanists, looked derisively at the worthless cacao beans. How ironic that the annual global value of chocolate today is estimated to be well over $120 billion. In other words, each year, chocolate is worth more than all the gold and silver the conquistadores stole from the Aztecs and Incas combined. We can all agree that the Spanish conquistadors were an evil and bloodthirsty lot, but I don't want to give the impression that all the American First Nations peoples were timid pacifists who didn't resist the invading Spaniards. As I said, the initial contact between Europeans and the Mayans was in 1502, and the Spaniards didn't reach the mainland, that is, the coast of Yucatan, Mexico, until 1508. John Henderson, a leading expert on Central America, wrote in his classic text, The World of the Maya, quote, "In 1511, a caravel from Darien, Panama to Santo Domingo went aground off the shoals of Jamaica. The dozen survivors who drifted ashore on the east coast of Yucatan 10 weeks later became the first Europeans to have extended contact with the Maya. Juan Valdivia, the commander, and 4 companions met quick deaths on the sacrificial altar. Their bodies were consumed in a cannibalistic ritual. Another survivor actually joined the Maya and later refused to be repatriated, preferring to remain with his Mayan wife and children. He maintained his position as a prominent military commander in the service of the Lord of Chetumal for 20 years. He died in 1536 in Honduras in command of a flotilla of war canoes, defending the commercial interests of the Mayan king of Chetumal against the Spaniards. After the battle, his horrified fellow Spaniards found his corpse among the slain, hair worn long, body tattooed, lips and ears pierced for jewels. But the pre-Columbian peoples whose relationship with cacao we know best are the fearsome Aztecs of ancient Mexico. Make no mistake, the bloodthirsty Spaniards were determined to eradicate Aztec culture, but a few relatively sympathetic Spaniards recorded invaluable information that would otherwise have been lost. The Franciscan friar Bernardino de Sahagún, often regarded as one of the world's first field ethnographers, documented Aztec beliefs, culture, and practices. Francisco Hernandez, royal physician to King Philip II of Spain, was sent to Mexico by the Spanish monarch to learn about Mexican medicinal plants. Both recorded key info about the role of cacao, and magic mushrooms for that matter, in Aztec culture. The Aztecs rose to power in Central America around 1300 AD, long after the Maya civilization had reached its peak and begun to decline. Like the Maya, however, they were known for their sophisticated agricultural practices, their monumental architecture, and complex political, religious, and social systems. The Aztecs were resourceful urban planners and hydraulic engineers, as well as skilled artisans and astronomers. As with the Mayas in Aztec culture, cacao held immense significance as both a sacred and a valuable commodity, serving as a symbol of wealth, well-being, prestige, power, and divine favor. It was revered not only for its culinary qualities, but for its spiritual and medicinal value as well. The Aztecs consumed cacao as a beverage, often as a bitter concoction made from roasted cacao beans, water, and spices such as the chile peppers. Most historical accounts emphasize its bitterness, but this was clearly not always the case. these early Mexicans sometimes prepared the drink with honey, allspice, vanilla, and sweet maguey sap. This beverage was enjoyed by nobility and warriors alike, often served in elaborate ceremonies and feasts. It was believed to have various medicinal properties, including boosting energy and acting as a male aphrodisiac. Like the Maya before them, the Aztecs utilized cacao as both a currency and as tribute, playing a pivotal role in trade, diplomacy, and social interactions. Cacao beans were meticulously cultivated, dried, and stored in specialized granaries called cacahuatl, or houses of cacao, containing multitudes of millions of beans. In the renowned work True History of Chocolate by Sophie and Michael Coe, they quote an early account that estimates Montezuma's guards alone, that is the king of the Aztecs, consumed 2,000 chocolate drinks daily, and that the emperor's storehouses contained multiple millions of beans, the Aztec version of Fort Knox. Furthermore, the economic significance of cacao extended beyond local trade, involving extensive international commerce, as the Aztecs maintained robust networks of long-distance exchange with their neighboring indigenous groups. A notable distinction between the Maya and the Aztecs lies in their geographical settings. While the Maya inhabited the rainforests of the Yucatan, the Aztec culture thrived in a drier zone, meaning cacao beans were an imported lifeblood of the economy as far as the Aztecs went. Cacao was widely employed in religious rituals and ceremonies. The Aztecs believed that cacao was a gift from the gods, particularly Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity. Cacao was offered to the gods in rituals promoting agricultural fertility, war victories, and other significant occasions. As with the Maya before them, it played a central role in ceremonies and rites of passage such as birth, marriage, and even death. Cacao carried social significance, frequently served during negotiations and diplomatic gatherings as a symbol of hospitality. So important was cacao that when Aztec Emperor Montezuma had his first and fateful meeting with the rapacious conquistador Hernan Cortés, his retinue served Cortés chocolate in a golden goblet. Knowing the insatiable greed of the invading Spaniards, we can be certain that Cortés was more enthralled by the golden goblet than by its contents.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please remember to check out other episodes, from ayahuasca to magic mushrooms, from the ethnobotany of warfare to the history and prehistory of wine. Please give us a top rating and subscribe and share with like-minded folks. We appreciate your support for the protection of the knowledge and biodiversity of South America by the Amazon Conservation Team at www.amazonteam.org. In the next episode, join us again as Dr. Mark Plotkin charts the delicious history of chocolate from the halls of Montezuma to the high courts of Europe.